Hey there, Wargamers, and welcome to another painting video that I've done. This time it's going to be on Guilliman's Flaming Sword of the Emperor. So, we have the base model right here. We have some of the paints in the background that I'm going to be using. And we're going to start off just with corn red to base it. So make sure you have nice thin layer of corn red. Just make sure it goes on nice and smooth. Because this is going to form the base layer for the entire sword. So you want to make sure that it's not going to obscure any details and that you're not going to get any of the streaks. So once that's done, we're going to move on to Wild Rider Red. And once again, make sure you thin it down because what we want to do is we just want to lightly apply it. It's gonna take a coat or two. And you'll see over the course of this process that I go over some older areas as well. And with this one, we're just going to take it right up to the tip of the sword. But one thing we're not going to do is put it right down to the base. We're going to stop just shy of the base of the blade because once again we want to have that transition from the deeper red to the Wild Rider just as we sort of bring up the brightness of the blade. We're also going to touch up bits of the flame. And, you know, as you can see, we've switched over to the other side of the sword and we're just doing the same process. And at this point, we're just starting to bring up the flames themselves, just to get that color up, to build up the brightness a little bit. So just polishing it up a little bit. And as you can see, this is what it looks like after it's dried. So you can see that transition near the base of the sword, and you can see we still have some deeper parts of the red on the flames licking off the blade itself. So once that's done, we're going to move on to Troll Slayer Orange. This is going to be the next highlight on it. And once again, just get nice thin coats of Troll Slayer Orange because we definitely don't want to be putting on it too thick. We want to have that nice gradual transition. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to focus mostly on the core of the blade, so that raised centerpiece, as well as the edge of the blade, and then the base of the flames licking off it. Because what we're doing is we're just trying to build up the brightness in the center of the blade where it's going to be the hottest and thusly the brightest on the model. Because I know it's, for whatever reason, a lot of people really like to try and do it the other way around, where it's brightest at the tips and of the flame and the blade and whatnot. But when you look at fire, it's always brightest in the middle. So here we are. We're just building up the color. We're just making it a little bit stronger. Just trying to get that transition to be a little bit stronger. Just putting it along the edge of the blade here, and just really trying to build it up and give it a nice solid look to it. So just putting up a couple finishing touches, and you can take a look at it right there. You can see that nice transition near the base of the sword. Next up, we're just going to hit it with some Bloodletter Glaze. Now this is just to sort of tie some of the steps together. You can do it at this step, you can do it at a later step. I chose to do it now just to tie it up a little bit, just to start getting an idea of what the color was going to be, just to sort of build up the transitions near the base of the blade itself, just clean them up a little bit. But once again, you can choose when you want to do it. So just finish it up here. Then we're going to move on to Uriel Yellow. And this one is just so we can build up the brightness in the center of the blade. So once again, very thin layers of paint here. You don't want to be obscuring any of the transition work we've already done. And what we're just trying to do is build up the core of the blade. So basically where it's going to be hottest. So we're trying to avoid as much of the edges of the blade as we can, trying to keep it to the center of that raised area. As well as we're going to be putting it along the base of the flames closest to the sword itself. Now, because you're working with yellow, this is probably going to be one of the longer parts of the blade process, just because yellow is it's always a bit notorious to work with. The pigment's always a little bit low, so you have to put on more thinner layers of it to really build it up and get that brightness, and that can be definitely challenging for a handful of people. So as you can see here, I'm very gradually applying it, being very deliberate, trying not to go too high up on the sword itself, trying not to hit too much of the flames, just trying to keep those transitions nice and clean. And you can start seeing the look of it coming together as we just add some more of the color to it. So once the yellow is done, we're going to move on to the final highlight of White Scar. Now this one, once again, very thin. And we're just going to apply it to the very center of the blade, so right along that center raised element of the sword itself. And we're just going to build up the strength of the white right along the center of it. And this is just to represent where it is hottest. What we're also going to do is we're going to put a little bit on the tips of the tip of the blade as well. And just to give it a little bit of contrast at the point, maybe because, some of the heat might be centered there or whatnot, but in this case I'm doing it simply because it looks a little bit nicer to have that final highlight at the top there. But just be very careful about applying it. You don't want to go too heavy on it. You want to try and keep it as thin as possible because you don't want it to be overpowering everything else. And as I've been saying this entire video, you want to make sure that those transitions remain nice and gradual. You don't want anything that's too overpowering or too strong, just because you want to get that nice consistent look across the blade. And finally, we're just going to hit up the edges a little bit just to give it a little bit of that spot highlight at the very top there. So there you go. You can quickly see what it looks like as I've finished off most of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and hit with some glazes again, and we're going to do bloodletter glaze first. Now be careful with this one because it will tint the white almost to a pinkish orange color. So you'll probably have to go over it a little bit more just to make sure you get that nice bright spots to it. But in this case, I wanted to do it just to bring everything together, to smooth those transitions a little bit, and just build up the warmth of the sword. Now, one reason I really wanted the warmth was because of how blue and gold the model is. There's a lot of cooler colors with the blue. So once you're done with the bloodletter glaze, you're going to move on to lamenter yellow glaze, and this is the same deal. Basically, you're just bringing it up along the center of the blade, just bringing the transition to a little bit more yellow in the center, brighter in the center, and darker down near the base of the sword and the tips of the flame. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a final highlight touch-up, starting with Uriel yellow. So once again, very thin, and you can see I'm just going over the center of it again, just trying to bring up the brightness of the core of the sword, just really emphasizing where it should be the hottest. And once we're done with that, we're going to move on to white scar, and this is going to be the same deal. We're just going to, using very thin layers of it, just bring up the highlights and the points of it, just to showcase where it would be hottest and brightest, as well as just clean up a little bit of the blade itself where we might have lost some color or lost some brightness. So as you can see, I'm just being very careful, very deliberate with it. And as you can see, those are all the colors we used in the background there, and you can check out the sword itself, and it has a rather nice effect. Now, I'm not used to doing this one, so it's not the best one out there, but it definitely suits its purposes. So hopefully you took away something from this and you enjoyed it. Definitely leave your comments below, like, subscribe if you want to see more, and as usual, thank you for watching, and happy wargaming.